Welcome to our small group leader training for term 3.
We would love for you to watch this with other small group leaders as a way of sharing together. Perhaps there's some insights or things that you can talk about and that you can discuss the questions that we have. There's 3 questions, one after each of the sections in this video today that Tabs is going to check in on as well about your answers for those. But it'd be great if you could, if you're watching this on your own, stop and then find out, maybe ring up another leader and watch this with them. There will be so much more you'll get out of it if you do that. So as I just said, there's 3 parts to this video today. The first part is looking at small group dynamics and looking at how we can balance our small group well.
Secondly, we're going to look at how our relationship with Jesus affects how we lead our people. The more we love Jesus and the more we go deep within him, it changes how we engage with our people.
Third and finally, we're going to check in on our missional wells, how we're going and what we need to do next.
So those 3 parts correspond to the in, up and out that we also cover in our small group material each week, and that is our vision for our parish, going deeper into Jesus, deeper with each other and deeper into our city. And in this first part now, we're going to look into the in part. How do our group dynamics look? What does it look like to lead a group well? We were going to do this in our small group leader training day, and we would get you all up and we would have a little group sitting with little cards of how you were going to react to the small group leader asking a question or whatever. It's going to be an awesome role play, which of course now we had to pivot just a little bit. So Caleb's going to be playing all the participants of the small group, and I will be the leader. And this is just to show how we can what could help in guiding the conversation and in making our people feel welcome and at ease and able to join in with what is happening. Come on in. Are you sure you're not too early? Come have a seat. Come have a seat. Sorry, let me just turn on the lights. And it's a bit cold in here, eh? Here, have a seat. Let me turn on the heater. Can I offer you a cup of tea?
Yes.
Great, I'll just go get that.
So obviously, setting up the space has a big impact upon how people feel when they come. We want people to be at ease. The more they're at ease, the more that they'll share with each other, the more they'll connect with Jesus, the more that you'll grow as a group together. And so have a real think about how you lay out your room, if it's in your home, the type of food you'll have and drinks, and perhaps even if your kitchen's in a different place than your living room, for example, that perhaps you've already got drinks set up, etc. Just as a way of not leaving your people alone, but making your space really hospitable.
Welcome everyone to small group. I'm so glad you could make it today. That is awesome. We're gonna start with let me just have a look. That's right. It's the Bible bit in the beginning, and then that's right. In the in part, yes, we're gonna start with our high, lows, and giggles. Everybody share. What was your high, low, and giggle from this last week? As part of the preparation, it's so important to read through the material, even watch the video before you come to group so that you know what's happening. It's really helpful that the material is always set up the same way. So as we keep doing it, it just gets implemented and we don't have to think about it so much anymore. We know that after the high-low giggle, we share accountability, then we have a moment of silence. These things, it's really helpful to come prepared. high, lows, and giggles. Everybody share their high, low, and giggle.
Well, I've got it. 17 highs. That's more than I had last week. And actually, so the first one was happened this morning while I was in the car. I was traveling with Sandra, which actually reminds me of something that she said yesterday, which was about, you know, that thing that I shared about the giggle last week with Terence? Yes, that's right. Well, actually, that was to do with the trip that we had in Wellington, you know, the one. Well, actually, that was last Friday when it was really windy. And so anyway, we were traveling in the car, and then what happened... You may have one of those in your small group. The third issue that we're looking at here is when people overshare or talk too much. I'm sure every group has one of those. There's a couple of things to watch out for here. One is that this actually might be a display that somebody is lonely or they're anxious, and actually that means that you might need to be checking in on them or making the space much more accessible for them. But if actually it's just an issue that they're not being sensitive to the other people around them, a private conversation is really necessary. And you might need to take that person aside and say, hey, just notice that that you share a lot in High Low Giggle, for example, and that actually takes up the time for other people. And actually we're here for everyone in the space. And so just to be aware of that. Yeah.
This that people share a lot sometimes also happens when we have read scripture, for example. Somebody, you know, has a lot of knowledge and wants to share that, which is beautiful, except it's not always the right space to share 10 minutes long of a particular word they studied or whatever. So it's worth knowing that might happen, and then acknowledging the person and going, thank you so, almost interrupting them, going, thank you so much for sharing. Maybe we can continue this conversation after group today. But for now, can we just carry on with this question or something like that? Making them feel valued, but at the same time carrying the conversation on so as to not take away from
the rest
of the group. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, it says here we're to do some silent prayer. Just a moment of stillness, I guess 5, maybe 2 minutes. So thank you that you're here, Jesus. That might have been a little bit over the top, or was it? But the way we set up silence is key. If we're confident in how we're leading the group into that moment of stillness, then they're confident in following into the moment of stillness. Silence is important because it makes our focus go back on Jesus. We're focusing back on his presence in the room. It's not about us or them. It's actually about him. And it gets people to have a moment of calm and stillness in their day, maybe reflect on and center themselves in the moment. So doing the silence and practicing it, and maybe even making it longer and longer each time, is a really great way of drawing people deeper into Jesus' presence.
That's really good. We the other week in our group, I just felt a nudge to ask everyone what they do in their 5 minutes of silence. And it was really fascinating because everybody had a deep practice that they did during those 5 minutes, and all of them varied. So some people shared about the fact that they breathed really slowly. Some of them just prayed through their day and let it go. Someone else was sharing about the fact that they use this prayer word to keep their focus on it. Someone was talking about deep encounter with God. Some people were just talking about that it was just a space of breathing and relaxing. And all of those were really valid, but it was so good to voice it because most people didn't realize what everyone else was doing, and silence can be really vulnerable, but it's actually such a treasure. And as Tab said, it's about reprioritizing the presence of Jesus, and that's what we've come to gather around.
So, what did everyone get from the reading?
Oh, sorry. Wasn't listening. Sometimes it's like bleeding blood from a stone. It's so hard if people don't respond when we open up our conversations, or if we're in the deep question section. But really, to be blunt, it's on us as leaders if our people aren't sharing. We've got to create not just the right environment that we've talked about before, but we've got to set it up really well. And perhaps there's some practices that if your group is struggling in sharing, that you can add. I know there's a number of different groups that have some different tools, and we've got 4 tools that we recommend that you could implement into your group that we think are helpful for group dynamics. So the first one is something that a group does, which is called thinking time. And basically, it's when the question has been asked, then we give sometimes just 30 seconds just to allow people to think. It gives the introverts a chance to kind of process, but it also means that people know that they've got something that they're then going to share, and it's not just kind of whatever's on the top of their head. But so thinking time being number one. The second one is practice that some of the groups do, which is that you have an order in which people respond. So everyone knows that it's not their turn yet, or they've had their turn and now it's somebody else's. We used to call this circle of death because it means that it's coming along and now you're going to have to respond. But actually, one of the groups here call it circle of life, which is such a positive spin on it. So you could try circle of life so that you know that everybody's going to answer this question, and everyone knows that that's going to happen. In fact, both of those, thinking time and circle of life, work quite well together. The third thing that we wanted to talk about was something that we do in our group quite a bit, is that after a question we break into smaller groups. So whether that's breaking into 2s or 3s or however many in your group, but that you distill that thinking first, and then depending on time you can come and feed it back. When people are in smaller groups, sometimes they're much more likely to share. They feel more at ease to do that, and so that gives space. But also when there's fewer people, people feel kind of more obliged to talk. It's really important to give people a chance to talk, because when people engage, when people they talk, they actually engage, and that they feel like they participate and they learn. So the last thing that we want to talk about was think through beforehand. This is about the preparation piece that Tabs was just talking about in the last one, in the last scenario. But this one is about have some really good direct but leading questions, not just simple yes or no questions, or not really complex questions that people don't quite know what it is, but really direct questions. We try to ask that in our material each week, but you might come up with a better one for your group. But have a think about, how can I get people to engage with this passage, or how can I get people to engage with this thought? And let's lead that. So those were the 4 things: was thinking time, circle of life, breaking into small groups, or having direct but leading questions.
So for this last bit, we're going to continue thinking about our missional well. We've had some really good conversations this last week. Where do you guys think we're at with this?
Well, thinking about that, I had a really difficult encounter with my boss today, which has started to happen more regularly. And she came into the office, and I actually hid under the table because I couldn't face what she was going to say. It's actually, I don't know what to do about it.
We all have these moments where somebody suddenly shares something vulnerably, and we recognize this is important for them. And in that moment, we have to discern, is this something that the whole group can benefit from discussing and blessing the person? Or is this something that would be better to meet up with the person later to talk about? And if somebody goes on and on, we have to be brave enough to nip it in the bud in a very gracious way, and to assure the person that we are going to talk about it, just not right now. If it is, however, helpful for everybody, then do take that moment and talk about that topic, and care for the person with everyone in the room. But this is basically a discernment piece. Us as leaders, we have to decide what is right now, and we can always ask Jesus, the Holy Spirit, to guide us in that moment if we're not sure. Yeah, and it's good if it's a particular vulnerable thing. It's always good to pray, and even if you nip it in the bud in the moment and you realize this is not for this moment, we can all gather around at that moment and pray blessing over them, and then you can say to them, hey, like you said, let's meet up and have coffee, and catch up then. Hope those were really helpful today. Those were our kind of 6 scenarios that we came up with, and we hope they were fun and engaging. And we do have a question which Tabs is going to ask of you. And if you're watching with other small group leaders now, which I hope you are, you can ask each other this question and share. And the question is, what one thing can you implement to benefit your group dynamics? So what one thing can you implement to benefit your group dynamics? We're now going to move to the second part of our triangle, the same that we look at in our small group material each week, which is up, the orientation of our life with Jesus. And so really what we want to ask is the question around how are you going with your journey with Jesus? Because how deep we go with Jesus ourselves has a direct impact on how we lead our people and if we lead them deeper into Jesus.
So we want to take some time just to think about our spiritual formation, and we'd love you to spend some time thinking about how you're going, how the depth of that is, but also about how you're prioritizing, organizing your life around him. Jesus talks about cleaning the inside of your cup. He talks about the type of fruit that we produce. And what he's kind of talking about there is he's talking about the formation of our character. He's not just he doesn't describe at any point that if you know the stuff, then you're a good leader, or if you are always holy, then you're a good person. He's talking about the formation of character, of the life of Jesus growing inside you. And as an image for this, Tabs and I over the years have talked about, and you may have heard this in other places too, but the concept of a barrel made with wooden staves. And the thing with the wooden staves that make up a barrel, let's say you've got water inside it, is that the water can only go up to the height of the smallest stave on the barrel. And so in our spiritual lives, if there's a part of your spiritual life that you've kind of left to the side or you don't really engage in, what that means is that your capacity to hold what God has for you is decreased. So, for example, if I spend loads of time reading my Bible, but actually I don't spend any time in prayer, then my prayer stave is short, if that makes sense. Or like if I spend time engaging in the power of the Spirit, but actually I never work on my habits, then I've got a short stave on my holiness. If I really engage with sharing with people who I love and praying for them and encountering them, but never go and engage with the poor, then I've got a stave that's short on the call of God in my missional work. And so therefore the capacity for God to fill me up to the fullness that I'm made to be is decreased by my lack of engagement in my spiritual journey. I just want to kind of think for a moment on the first few verses of Psalm 1, which describes this really well. It talks about the life of descent into destruction, basically, or the life that is fruitful. And it says this, it says, blessed is the one who does not walk in the way of the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the seat of scoffers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Such a one, this blessed person, the one who meditates, such a one is like a tree planted by streams of living water, that bears its fruit in and out of season, and its leaves do not wither. I love that psalm, and I love that word where it talks about that the tree is being planted by streams of living water. Our spiritual journey isn't something that just kind of happens. It's something you have to choose. The tree wasn't just there by chance. This tree bears fruit because it's by the river, and this one doesn't because it happened to not be by the river. Now this tree was planted by streams of living water. So, Tabs, I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about your current journey with Jesus and what Jesus is growing in you, and how you are planting yourself with Jesus, how you're growing that. Could you share some things?
Yes, I'd love to. As like most of you, I have some things in place that help me follow Jesus every day. For example, a quiet time in the morning, or we as a house, we do morning and evening prayers, which I find very helpful to center myself and to examine my day, those kind of things. But at the beginning of the year, I felt God call me to go deeper than that and find other ways to connect with Him in a deeper way. And so I've been exploring the discipline, I guess, of silence. So taking time out. I started with like 10 minutes in the morning, and then sometimes I would try like an hour on my day off or something like that. And just recently, I've done a day of silence. Basically, not turning on my phone and not talking. Silence often comes with solitude, so basically being by yourself. I take myself off so I don't. I'm not even here on the property where there's lots of people around, and then I sit in silence and I wait on God. And I have things like I read a psalm first, or something like I have a word to focus on. But it's about opening myself up so that God can speak into my life. I give Him a chance to say what He has to say, and this has been very revealing. I've discovered all sorts of things about forgiveness. For example, I suddenly realized there's people I need to forgive, and if I hadn't quietened down enough to listen to Jesus, I wouldn't have heard that was a thing. And by then realizing, I need to forgive someone, and going through the process of forgiving them, this is now released and not part of my soul anymore. Whereas if I hadn't had taken the time, it would still be sitting there in me, doing its work without me realizing. So yeah, that has been really awesome. And it all started with God saying, here, I want to call you deeper. Why don't you try this? And it's actually really funny because about 12 years ago, Caleb was talking to me about silence. And he was like, you should totally try this. And I didn't for the last 12 years until now. He's been harping on about it this whole time. And I only to now realize that this is something I need to do in order to go deeper with Jesus. Yeah.
There might be something that God is nudging you to take on, something like silence or solitude or fasting or memorization of scripture. Usually it's just a plethora of these things. They're all available to us. It's like a smorgasbord of delights that we can take and be transformed by using. But the reason that we do these is not so that, Tabs is a good person who's silent, or that Caleb's a good person who memorizes scripture. But actually, by doing these things, we get formed deeper into the way of Jesus. And like what we would love is for our characters to shine in such a way that that people see Jesus through us. I want our small groups to be wooed by your spiritual life, that your passion for Jesus, or your growth in Him, or the transformation that Jesus does in your soul. I want that to be such a light that everyone in your small group goes, I want to learn how to do what that person is doing. so that we may grow deeper in our walk with Jesus. So the second question that we have for you, which Tabs will be checking in on your coffee catch-up, is where are you growing in your spiritual life? So this is our third part of the video where we're moving into the out section. We've looked at in and how we do small group dynamics well. We've looked at up and our spiritual formation, how important that is. And now we're moving to out. This is the part of the small group material that probably gets missed each week or you feel awkward or anxious about. I know that for me, as we're coming towards it, I'm thinking, I'm running out of time, I'm not going to have time, etc. But it's a really important part, most especially because it was specifically God's call when we did our Future Flow vision process, that God called us to not only go deep with Him in small groups, but actually that our small groups then would pioneer missional wells. And so this is a call of God that we are invited to obey. That's why we've been doing this sermon series recently, looking at what does discipleship look like, and it looks like obedience to Him. It looks like something that's costly, that's perhaps hard for us, but it looks like blessing other people outside of ourselves. It looks like going out. That's why we're doing this sermon series. That's why we're digging in, because we want to get these missional wells up and running, and we know that this is the call of God. So we've got to figure out how do we align with that. But it is awkward and it's difficult, and it's new for us. And change and newness is always squiffy. So we just want to take a moment just to clarify a couple of things, because some of the feedback that we've had from people is kind of displaying that perhaps we haven't talked about it enough, and we haven't been really clear on what a missional well is or what it could be. So we just want to take a moment to talk about that before we get on to evaluating where we're at. So the first thing, just to say that what a missional well is it's something that you as a small group, all of your members of your group, do together to bless someone outside of yourselves. So it could be a person or an organization or a group of people or some issue that you see, but it's you doing something together that blesses someone outside of yourself.
And in this, we got to ask ourselves, how can I personally be involved? So if my group is doing this thing, what is my part in it? What can I do? Because the idea is not to, all collect our money and then pay someone else to do mission for us. But the idea is that we actually meet with the people and we actually pay the cost. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is always, what is my part in this? How can I be involved?
I know. And it can be something small. The thing that we do doesn't have to be world-changing, and particularly when we start, we just need to take step by step. We need to kind of figure out what's the next thing that we can do just to get us moving, to join in with what God is doing in the world, because even doing that starts to transform us, grows our hearts, grows our lives together. For example, Robin and Yvonne's group have gathered together and baked some goods that they've taken to the hospital to bless the staff at the hospital. This is not a major missional well. It's only a moment in a staff person's day to receive some baking, but actually it really does make a difference.
And the process is that you come up with an idea, and I would recommend using the 4 circles that we put on the back of the small group material as part of the missional wells. Discovering what we're all passionate about, where we see God's people's needs, and how that aligns with God's idea for us in our world. And then when you come up with an idea, then come and speak to me, and then we can talk about how I will probably say this is awesome, let's go ahead. But just in case there's some questions I could ask to help you along in your journey too, come and speak to me, and before you go for it. That'd be really good. And so now we are going to look into where we are at right now with our missional wells, evaluate and see how we can move forward.
to help us evaluate where we're at with our wells, we've got a rope here, which is kind of our sliding scale of where we're at in our journey. This isn't a judgment piece in the sense of we're not doing enough or we're not capable, but it's just really important for us to clarify where we're at so that we can see how we can take our next step in it. So at this end of the rope just here, this is, I have not done anything about our missional well. I've avoided the conversation every time, or perhaps maybe I've brought it up, but we haven't done anything about it because I feel it's too squiffy or awkward or difficult or whatever it is. So that's this end of the scale, done nada, nothing. And then as you move along the scale, there's kind of discussing it, or maybe just starting it, or maybe growing in it, and right down when you get to the other end of the rope, that's when you're making a difference in people's lives, that actually their lives are totally changed, and Jesus is being made known to people, and people are waking up and going, actually, Jesus makes a difference in all of our lives. So that's kind of the influence end that we would love to get to at some stage. But all of us probably are somewhere right down towards the beginning. But I'd just love you to take a moment now and to share with the person that you're watching with about where you feel you are on your scale. Tabs and I are going to take a very long walk to get right down to the other end. No, we're not. And we're going to take our walk to where we evaluate that we're at, so that we can just clarify, okay, this is where we're at. God, what are you inviting us to do next? So where are you at on the rope?
With my small group, we're a bunch of ladies, and we meet on a Thursday night. Some of us can't come out at night, so they join in on Zoom. And one of our group had the idea that we could create some packs that of toiletries and a dressing gown and some things that people need as they get admitted to hospital if they didn't have time to pack a bag. Because people are in a vulnerable position, obviously being admitted to hospital on short notice or whatever, being in an accident, and then if they don't even have the essentials is terrible. So the idea was that that we would create some packs and somehow deliver them to people. Now this is an epic idea, serves some people in need that we're trying to bless. We can all get involved because there's little jobs everybody could do to be part of this process, but we have no idea whether there's already a system like this in place. We don't know if the hospital even wants that. And so we're needing to explore whether this is something we can take further. So I'm pretty much still in the beginning of this line because we've only really had an idea, but now we need to go and do something about it. And so this is and that's what we're going to do. We're going to get someone to ring the hospital and find out things. We're going to see if we can all afford to buy stuff for the packs, how we're going to go about delivering them. So we're just now taking steps how we can make this possible. And it is also a possibility that it's going to fail. It's possible that hospital is going to say, no, we don't need that. Or that we discover actually it's too expensive for us to buy all the toothbrushes or whatever. But that's okay, because we've started a step, and then in the process we're going to figure out whether it works or not, and then we can just switch it to something else, or we can go ahead and do it. But the idea is to go for it. So that's where we're at the moment. Yeah.
My group is mostly young couples, and we meet on Zoom, mostly because people are putting their kids to bed sometimes during the beginning of small group, and then parents appear partway through. And we're only a smidge on from Tabs's group, so we've been discussing for a while, and we've had a bunch of different dreams and ideas, but suddenly passion came around doing community gardens. Now, there are some community gardens already across the city. There's one, the Lutheran Church has one next to our house. St. Peter's, part of our parish, has got one as well. But there are a couple of others scattered around. And so we kind of started thinking about how we could help support them, or what we could do about that. But it actually takes quite a lot of mahi, a lot of work and a lot of time to do that. And we've got almost all of our folk have got young kids, and so we're trying to figure out how to get our kids involved and that sort of thing. But we got to the point where we were like, we just need to start doing something. We need to just get out there and do something together so we get the vibe and the joy of that. And even when we tried to do that, we couldn't line up a time. And part of that is because we've all got busy agendas, but part of it is also because we weren't prioritizing it. Mm-hmm. And we had some vulnerable conversations about, actually, we just need to do this. Mm-hmm. And so actually, we just put in the date, and as many people as possible started our first activity. And we haven't gone for the community gardens yet. We're working towards that. What we've decided to do first is actually to get wood that we can distribute into people's homes next winter. And so we went and collected the wood from Palmerston North and have brought it here. We got our hands on a whole load of really good timber. And we're going to gather again in just a couple of weeks' time and chop up that wood, and then we're going to keep it somewhere and store it. And then just the beginning of next winter, we're then going to take it out into people's homes. And I'm really looking forward to that moment when we engage with people in need and are able to bless them in that process. It's a small start, but we just needed to get out there and do it. So a bunch of hours were spent the other day in the back of Hamish Orritt's horse cart with 5 ton of timber. But that we would love to get to the stage further along where either we do loads of timber for people's homes or we actually help community gardens flourish and help provide food for people, particularly at a time where food costs a lot. But we just needed to get out there and do it. So that's our first step. The key thing that we want to think about now is about how do we move further along the line. This is an invitation that God has for us. He's calling us along this line to progress in our group, for our group to be participating more and more in the abundant blessing of life that God has, that we can share that with all people. But you have to think about tangibly, what is the one thing that your group needs to do? Or perhaps, what is the one thing that you as a leader need to do to enable your group to move along? How can you take a next step so that your group can progress along this? So take a moment now, maybe share with the person next to you. Perhaps have a moment of silence and pray and say, God, what is it that I can do now to move further along this line?
We encourage you to just go out there and do it. Don't be afraid to fail.
And pray and pray and pray. Pray together, pray for it. This is God's call. This is what He's calling us into. And He equips where He calls. So we can trust that He's going to help us in this. So Tabs is one question that she's going to ask you when she catches up with you is what one thing are you going to do to move your missional well further along this line? What one thing are you going to do?
Thanks so much for listening and joining in with us. I hope you had fun and that you gathered with someone else to experience this together. Keep eating those foods and, chatting about the stuff. Our next small group leader training date is the 12th of November, where we will meet in person again, and I look forward to that. Bless you guys.